My Lords, I think this has been a fascinating debate and a well-conducted debate, and I have appreciated all of the contributions, even those that I don't agree with. And I think I particularly want to mention the Noble Lord, Lord Herbert's contribution, because he and I have worked together on an all-party basis for many years in trying to influence things. And I do think it's important sometimes to reflect on the journey that we've been on and the role of legislation in that journey, because the Noble Lord Hannon referred to it in terms of how that has changed things. And one of the things I've been around perhaps too long. I've been around a long time and entered many of these debates, and I've heard concern about legislation, whether it be the GRA or whether it be equal age of consent or even civil partnerships. I remember I planned my civil partnership on what I hoped would be the first day of its introduction, but sadly it got delayed by a whole year because of the actions of this House in restricting movement on civil partnerships. But then when I heard the debate on equal marriage, in fact what was a revelation to me was that all the people who would oppose civil partnership, including the bishop benches, suddenly were saying, we support civil partnerships, but we're not happy about same-sex marriage. And I think, don't underestimate the role legislation has in terms of influencing attitudes and changing behaviour. It can be really important. And I must admit, I sort of, the Noble Lord Moore, it sort of made me jump a bit, because Section 28, clearly, legislation, a reaction to, as he put it, left-wing councils, actually, something that actually wasn't happening, as he admitted himself. And that legislation didn't actually change things in schools in the way that perhaps those who moved it understood. But what it did do, it unleashed homophobic attitudes in a way that you couldn't possibly understand. I know from my own experience, even though we had 67, legalisation of homosexuality, suddenly, I'm walking down the street, I get homophobic comments. It unleashed it for many, many years. But every change we made from 97, I think, has had a positive attitude on the British public. Now I can talk about my husband. People respect it. Now if I go to the doctor and talk about my next of kin being my husband, it's understood and respected. Attitudes have changed immensely. Now, I think, my starting point in this debate is, of course, Theresa May and her declaration 2018. And I think most people accept that there should be a ban on all forms of coercive conversion practices. And Theresa May described it as being urgently needed. But we've not seen anything from the government, sadly, 6 years on, when it was first promised in the excellent LGBT action plan. And of course that was after commissioning research and promising legislation in 2021, and then in March 22 we had a report saying that the plans were dropped entirely, and then it was moving forward then backwards, and of course the beginning of this year we had a commitment to a trans-inclusive ban. But I suspect the Noble Lady, the Minister, will sort of maybe share or lament some of this sorry saga of being positive about change and then it being negative. But I think really the people who've paid the price for that delay and that sorry saga, are our LGBT people, our LGBT plus people. They've paid the price because they have not been kept safe. And that's what this debate is about. And I hope the noble lady, the Minister, will take the opportunity to explain the government's policy on conversion practices and what it actually is now. Because I want to understand why no draft bill has been introduced and why the government find it so difficult. Is this really about policy differences or the problems about personalities? And I hope, and it is right, that the government should really come forward with its own proposals. I think, I share many of the concerns that noble lords have expressed about this specific bill. And I would like to sort of ask her, there is another bill that's going through this Parliament, but it's in the other end. And it's my honourable friend, Lloyd Russell Moyle. And that bill is backed by many members of the Conservative Party to ban conversion practices overall. And actually, a number of noble lords have mentioned in this debate about pre-legislative scrutiny on a future bill, to which the government is apparently still committed to. So when will it get underway? When will we see it? All the questions that have been raised in this debate deserve an answer. And we want to make progress. I hope that the Minister will be able to be confident that we will be able to conduct meaningful scrutiny before the end of the Parliament and before the general election. My Lords, I think we've been too slow on this. 18 months ago, my right honourable friend Annalise Dodds, Shadow Minister for Equalities, asked whether the government had gathered any evidence about the impact of a well-drafted ban on conversion practices on the provision of legitimate talking therapies. She asked for any evidence or statements from medical bodies suggesting any concerns that a conversion therapy ban would have a chilling effect, or that a trans-inclusive ban would put such treatments at risk. Legitimate questions that have been asked in this debate, which I think the government has a responsibility to answer. My right honourable friend didn't get any answers when she asked them, and I suspect I won't get any today. My Lords, conversion refers to changing and not to the exploration of people's real selves, including for young gay men and young lesbian women from transition that they have, that they were always gay. What safeguards or principles does she envisage would be introduced to prevent the acceleration through affirmation of young people into gender services, where they are experiencing conversion therapy of a radical surgery? Questions that are being raised. The government have a responsibility to give us the answers on these, particularly if they gave a very strong commitment. We acknowledge that there are complexities, and we on the Labour benches have a different approach. There are complexities, but it's our job to protect the public from harm. Like the BMA, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and countless other organisations that believe that conversion practices constitute abuse. We are clear that a bill to ban these practices must, of course, be carefully and sensitively drafted so that it doesn't cover psychological support and treatment, non-directive counselling or pastoral relationship between teachers and pupils or religious leaders and worshippers. These are matters that legislators can work through sensibly, and I'm confident that we can do that. A ban would not cover quiet conversations and friendships. A ban would not cover discussions within families which are based on the need for love and support. A ban would not and must not have an impact on the provision of psychological, medical and supportive services for children and young people. As I've said, much more support and psychological counselling is needed, not less. And that is the very clear view from the interim CAS review that noble lords have mentioned. Now, on Wednesday night, I spoke to my honourable friend, Lloyd Russell Moore, the speakers, Mr. Speaker, had an event on LGBT history, a fantastic event, a range of people, including trans men and trans women. And what he told me is that what he settled on is predetermined purpose. That's what he's put in his bill. It says, much like false advertising, you can't set about to change someone because it's not possible in law, so it would be a fraud. The words in his bill are also clear that the intent cannot be entered into during the process of a conversation, but it must be predetermined beforehand. So that's what we're talking about here. I know lots of other things have been raised, particularly about gender. But when somebody says, you must come for this therapy because we are going to change you from being gay to straight, that is what needs to be stopped, because that has a huge impact. My Lords, other bills have tried to focus on harm, and this is already an offence, as we've heard. The ability to prosecute is hard, though. It requires the victim to re-traumatise themselves in a trial, and harm is often not known for a long, long time, again, as we've heard in this debate. My Lords, Labour believes that any ban must be carefully and tightly and clearly worded and appropriately implemented and assessed. They should surely be par for the course for any legislation, and it must also apply to conversion practices. Because of Russell's approach, I'm confident that it is possible to deliver a ban without ending up in the quagmire in which the government have found themselves. My Lords, we have a duty to ensure that every LGBT plus person can live their lives in dignity and free from abuse, just like anyone else. And I sincerely believe, as my noble friend Baroness Donaghy says, this bill does provide us, or give us the opportunity, to have space to look at these issues in detail, put the challenging questions that we've raised, and that's why it's important, I think, we give it a second reading.